This is the basics on how I dyed these wheels. First, you need a set of mostly white skateboard wheels. A little bit of logo is fine. You need RIT Synthetic dye. The DyeMore dye works best. Color combinations are endless. You need a container that can hold your dye and your wheels, and you need a few days, the minimum. If you'd like to see how I dyed these wheels, stick around for the tutorial and I'll tell you about it. This is the first set I did, these Tritone wheels. It looks way more complicated than it is. I just filled a container up with the dye to the level that I wanted, and I suspended the wheel down from the lid with some twine. You can do this however you want. I used the twine and clothespins, and I had each wheel hanging in that dye to the level for 3 days. I had 2 different containers with 2 different colors, so it was kind of working both sides of the color at the same time. You can control however much you want. Of course, you leave space with the white. That becomes part of the Tritone, which makes it super simple. I had seen some people boil the wheels in the dye. To me, that just seemed a little excessive for this, and I was concerned that it might change the wheels somehow. So I just went ahead with the cold soak, and I think the results are good enough for what this is. Before we continue with the next method, I thought I would just give you a little backstory why I'm even doing this. I didn't even know you could dye wheels until about a year ago. And so once I found out, I thought it would be pretty neat, because most of the wheels that I looked at and the size and the hardness that I wanted were just plain white, other than just maybe the description of the wheel, the name of it. So this gave me a way to get something custom look that I'm used to from back in the day, specifically some GNS Tritones that I had that you absolutely cannot find anymore, not even a picture of. I also always thought these Sims two-tone wheels are pretty cool too. So this was just basically a way for me to get that old school vibe that I remember. I wanted to try to dye these wheels too. I had already used them, but they were in good shape. So I cleaned them off with some alcohol and washed them down real good. And I used painter's tape to block off some different areas to make some stripes, or you can make stripes or angles or whatever you want. Then I dropped the whole wheel into the cold dye and let it sit again for another few days. And when you peel the tape off, you get the patterns, and some of them are sharper than others. Sometimes the dye will bleed under the tape, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, it looks cool and it gives the wheel that hand-done custom look. So I thought I would mention a couple of things that I tried that didn't really work, and I don't really recommend. But I tried it so you wouldn't have to. I thought about trying to do a tie-dye effect, and I had an idea about putting some dye in a plastic bag and getting a different pattern and letting it soak. But it really didn't work out that good, and it was just too much trouble for what it's worth. I think the soaking method worked a lot better, so I wouldn't recommend this. And I also thought about maybe making some kind of gel, and I had an idea with that gelatin to make a paste and put it on there, maybe in some stripes or some patterns or something like that. But this didn't work out really at all either, so it just didn't work out. But I thought I would give it a shot, so I wouldn't recommend that. But anyway, now you know that didn't really work. So this is the result of that after about a year. You can see it all kind of washed out, which that's something interesting in itself that we're going to get into in the final section, since I did these over a year ago. So hang tight. So since I did these about a year ago, I wanted to talk a little bit about how these held up. You can tell these faded a little bit and got a little washed out, but they still look pretty cool, and I'm happy with it. Now this is what those wheels looked like, the other ones I did originally, after I did them, let them soak for anywhere from 3 days to a total of 6 days for each color. And you can see it look real clear and crisp, and I even took that one wheel and cut it in half just to see how deep that dye went in. And you can see it wasn't very deep at all. So I went to look at the other wheels. When I went digging for them, I was going to show them to my son. I pulled them out and I noticed that they were all kind of washed out a little bit too and faded too. But to me, they still look pretty cool, so that's a win. But when I pulled out the one that I'd cut in half before, this is what I saw, and I was pretty surprised. I did not think that the dye would still soak in while they were just sitting there, not in the dye. So I immediately thought, I need to cut this in half again, just to see if it bled from the edges or if it went all the way through. So I went to the bandsaw and I cut it in half, and I verified that it did soak in uniformly all the way through. I guess it's more of a run or a bleed through, but it did do it. So as a bonus, while I was looking for these wheels too, I also realized that I had put one in the dye and just let it sit as a control, and I forgot about it. This thing's been sitting in dye for over a year. So of course, I immediately said I need to cut it in half and see what it looks like. So that evening I did just that, and you can see the results of that are that it soaked even further all the way through. I guess that's not a surprise. Anyway, that was an interesting fact that I didn't expect to have. So for side-by-side comparison, the first one is 4 days cold soak, and the second one is 4 days cold soaked and 1 year just sitting in a plastic bag, no climate control. And the last one is 1 year actually submerged in dye in a climate controlled environment. Well, that's it. Now as to why the dye did what it did, I'm not a polymer scientist, so I couldn't really tell you, but I did look it up on ChatGPT. It has some good info on it. If you're interested, check it out. Thanks for hanging to the end of the video, and if you do this or have done it, let me know what you think or what you think about the process. I appreciate you hanging out to the end. Most importantly, get out there and skate. Y'all take it easy. Oh, and like and subscribe too. Later.